Hello, this is Susan Beatty. You have gotten on to a website where I have videos of some reading strategies. We're here at Vineyard Christian Academy, where I'm a literacy consultant, and we have a beautiful homeschool and school model, school 3 days a week and homeschool 2 days a week. But we found that it's really, really helpful for me to be able to share with parents many of the concepts or strategies that I'm using with students or recommending for students for parents to use at home or maybe their teacher to really highlight in a classroom. So that's what these sessions are intended to do. So hope this is helpful for you. This one is called Powerful Reading Strategies, and it's actually how reading develops from the very beginning on up. So please remember that reading does not happen by age necessarily. If you have worked with very many readers at all, you will notice that some of them progress quickly, some of them not so quickly. Some of them get stuck on one thing and then another. So it is really imperative for those of us that are helping young readers or even older readers to understand the basic elements behind using the code. And just remember that, again, any one of these can be a glitch. So you just kind of check each one and see if it's solid, then you can move on. But any one of these can cause a student to trip in later reading. So there's that awareness of sound changes, and that's just essential at the beginning, that they can tell the difference between cut and cat, bit and hit. So they can tell where a sound changes. Is it at the beginning? Is it in the middle? So that awareness of sound changes. It normally happens fairly early, but not always. So just make sure that you're checking that and asking students. Sometimes I will have them have pennies down, and I will ask them to move the penny. Where did the sound change? So if I said my first word is bit, my second word is bat. Where did the sound change from bit to bat? Where's the sound change? And so I would expect them to move that second penny. Then there's the awareness of syllables. This normally happens quite early in children, and this rule or this generalization is quite solid in the population. We find it that very young children can clap syllables. They understand when you ask them to say happy or funny. They can actually hear those sound changes and represent it by a beat. Then there's the awareness of words. This cat is fat. And believe it or not, that does not always happen automatically, because a lot of times we run words together. And so a student is not really always aware of when the sound changes. And again, you could use any kind of tops to things, to lids or something like that, to move, or nickels or quarters instead of the pennies. So I wouldn't use the same object for a different categorization. But as soon as you move to a different one, think of something else that you could move. It could even be books, magazines, whatever. But for them to hear a sentence and then ask them, how many words do you hear? And they move whatever you're asking them to move, one for each word. So if they if you said the sentence, this cat is fat, you would want them to be able to move for this, move again for that. For this, and then for cat, and then for is, and then for fat. So then you're going to ask, of course, so how many words did you hear? Then comes phonics, learning the written code, and that's where you use spelling, and that's where you're going to encode is when you use spelling. To decode is when you're going to use sounding out a word. They are very, very much entwined in each other. So don't be afraid. In fact, it's very powerful to teach spelling and reading at the same time. So work with those words so that students see, it's represented in writing much the same way it is that I hear it. But I need to learn the codes for which ones, which letter combinations make what sound. So a linguist or someone that studies reading for a living, such as I did, learns things that are really just sort of words that only professionals within that very specialized profession would hear. So you may not be familiar with the word onset, but it does help. Once you understand it, you'll understand what an onset is. So the onset are the letters before the vowel. So that's the case in a syllable or within a word. So just within a word that makes it a little simpler, you can see that there's cat, cattle, and cause. So all those onsets are the same. So I would ask kids, are those the same or different? Then we can find things like fine, few, and funny. Those are all the same. Then pretty soon you could start giving your child ones and there'll be something different. If you've ever looked at a kindergarten workbook, you'll see that they're giving kids pictures and asking them which ones begin the same, which one is different. They're asking and they're trying to find out if they can identify the onset, just using their eyes if they're reading it, or using just their ears if you're only just giving it to them. But since this was on decoding, do you notice that I use the eyes? Because at this stage, I'm expecting that kids are reading. Then there's the R-I-M-E, and you may think, oh dear, that must be a mistake in spelling. Actually, here again, a linguist, and only a linguist, I was looking in the dictionary for R-I-M-E, and it's a kind of a frost on a pipe, and that's really the only one that they had. But a linguist, if you look at anything that is linguistically informed, or a reading specialist, would know that R-I-M-E would mean the same sound at the end. In other words, after the onset, when you begin to hear that vowel sound, that's the rhyme. It also, all the words need to have the same spelling, and that is not true in R-H-Y-M-E, what you and I grew up with, as far as just little rhymes that we learned when we grew up. The little spider sat down beside her, so spider and beside her don't necessarily have the same spellings, but they sound the same. Okay, these, because now we're using our ears and our eyes, we're looking for things that use the same spelling patterns, and you must learn to identify the same ones before you can then identify things that are different. So I would go with any child making sure that they can understand the same, and then you could draw like a T chart. That's just a T, a great big huge T on a piece of paper. And so then you could put one spelling for A at the top. You could put the AI at the top, and then maybe you might put a Y on the other side of the T. So then you divide them by spellings. We're working with rhyme, R-H-Y-M-E at that time. But you'll notice, but I'm going to separate them out by R-I-M-E, which one spells the same. That way my brain can categorize that. So hope that's helpful. So if you're looking at brain and rain, do they rhyme and rhyme? Yes, R-H-Y-M-E. Often things that rhyme can R-I-M-E, but not everything that rhymes, R-H-Y-M-E, will have the same spelling pattern. As you well know, when you go to try spell something, you'll think, oops, which letter do I use for that? Because there's more than one. So there's that Y at the end of a one-syllable word. That's helpful to know if you didn't know that. We'll say I at the end of one-syllable words, or at the end of a single syllable. If you go into two-syllable words or more, then it's going to change to an E. Happy, baby, funny. Or if you have fly, try, my. It's most helpful if you will give your kids words that they know, because then they can go, oh, it's as in. You notice it's helpful when I say as in something, you go, oh, I see. Then your brain can more effectively use it in a category. Then we move on to blending and segmenting. So, very first of all, children need to learn to blend words by blending the sounds that they hear, and the sounds that they and the letters that they see. So, words, they may not realize how many letters are in the word words. Words. So, when they're looking at them, they're going to have to, because we don't just say w, o, d, s. No, there's patterns in there, and we learned that or can say or, and it would matter whether it makes sense or not. So if I said, do you know that word, or do you know that ward? My brain will quickly tell me. So meaning is just huge in decoding. Don't ever try to just teach somebody how to decode without always asking them, does that make sense? Does that make sense? Because that's the easiest way, rather than thinking through all these millions of, not that there's millions, but all of the multiple of spelling generalizations. Ask if it makes sense. Then, so that's blending. And so blending, you just run your finger or something underneath the letters and have students see that you are putting those together. And sometimes I'll say, well, it's just like making cookies or something. We put in separate ingredients and then we stir them together. So we're sort of stirring those individual sounds into words. Now look down at the bird at the bottom. Now this is when you can learn to segment. Segment is when you blending, putting it together. Segmenting is when you take it apart. So when we take apart words, as a reader, you want to be very careful that you're not doing it letter by letter. If there are letters that should go together that say one sound, parents, keep them together when you're doing sound boxes. For example, and go by what your kids are missing or misunderstanding, what they're using but abusing. And if they can read the word bird, but they can't spell it, then you want to make sure you are doing something like a sound box. And so what sound box do you see for the it's the IR spelling. And you notice that I put it in color. Color and size. You can also make something, letters great big if your student is missing them, or in color. Something that kind of shocks the brain or is different and unique will really help with that neural pathway building that you're trying to do, so that you can recognize it automatically. All of everything I've been saying up to this point is to enable an individual to do something automatically. So just like when you are driving a car and you're learning how to shift, you don't want to have to go onto the freeway where there's other cars coming at you. And that's why we slow it down for young readers or beginning readers, or when something's tough, and slow it down. Then you can go where there's more words coming at you, and comprehension, which comprehension should always drive any kind of decoding. So, but we have to slow it down just a little bit first so that we can do one thing at a time. So then we can get to fluency. So fluency is once you have enough decoding under your belt and you have enough sight words under your belt, then you can begin to read a story, sentences, and write to where when you read it, it sounds like talk. A lot of people have a misconception about fluency because schools often test fluency. We time students in a 1-minute read and see how many words they can read. Well, that's just the way we dip in and take a little tiny quick assessment. It is not a true indication of fluency. Fluency, if you were to listen to a whole passage or a whole book or something, you would listen to the student read, see if they're stopping at periods, pausing at commas, and that their voice even gets a little fun in it if something's funny. So, the giraffe had a kink in his neck because you can tell by the way I read that, gosh, that would really hurt to be a giraffe and have a kink in something as long as a giraffe's neck. So you can tell by their intonation, and that's what you want to train. So parents, please, please, please have your kids reading a lot of easier text. Text is where they're not doing a lot of stumbling over decoding words. That needs to be slowed down and go back and work on those words. But so you want words or text to work on fluency that is easy and only a couple words to work on, but they're working on making it sound like talk. Great. Hope you understand that one. Okay, then it moves into orthographic processing. And again, this is a great big huge word that only is used in a professional setting, but I would just help you know that orthography is the ortho is the word, or at the word print level, and then the ography is just like geography. So orthography is the print that represents sound. And if you'll notice my little logo there, that's where we often trip because unlike Spanish or some other languages, English has more than one way to spell a sound. So one of the things that I've been shown, and it has worked very, very well over the years that I've worked with readers that are struggling, is a term called blocking. And blocking is obviously where your attention is on using your eyes. And in blocking, the focus is the correct sound pattern for a unit of sound. So have your child read each block and make sure you put heavy outlines on those so that they can really tell, where the block is. And then quickly blend the whole word. So blocking, and so they realize that's where the OCK is. That OCK needs to be said together, and once you learn OCK, you can use it in other words. We would never want kids thinking that they have to learn how to spell words one word at a time. That would be prohibitive. We could never get to very proficient spelling. But if I realize that OCK gets me there, and then I can get to rock, then I can get to clock, and I can get to block or other things that would have that OCK. I already said block, sorry. But you kind of get the idea. We want them to transfer that to that it will stay the same. That's the orthography. It will stay the same in other words. And if it doesn't, that once in a while when it doesn't, then I always ask my students, does it make sense? If it doesn't make sense, change it so that it makes sense. And when I say change it, you need to think about the vowel that's going to change, not the consonants. It's the vowel sound that may change. So in blocking, if your child is still tripping over the same words, if you're noticing that he's still tripping on the same word after two or three attempts that you've made to correct it and have him him or her attend to that word a little bit more, then I want you to notice, are they tripping on the onset, the rhyme? Remember, the rhyme is everything after the onset, or the ending. Sometimes it's a suffix, sometimes it's just the ending or the second syllable. But anyway, and so have them notice that. And a lot of times, I did not give you an illustration here, but a lot of times in English, it's the second syllable that goes into just an for the vowel. And so a lot of times that gets us tripped up a little bit because we're trying to apply either a short sound or a long sound, when actually it's just kind of our lazy way of pronouncing it. So anyway. So as a final step, then have your child reread the paragraph that you might have assigned or a section twice. So the first time, you're going to immediately block the words when the trip is noticed. Then, second one, again, listen for blocks. Then reread, jotting down the words where the trip still occurs for deeper practice. So first time through, you're just going to block it quickly and go on. You tell them if they're not sure, just tell them, put it in there. You want incorrect responses go into a neural pattern the same as a correct one. So you want, if they make a mistake, you must repeat it 3 times to them and have them say it 3 times, because it also sends a whole different signal to their brain when their own voice says it, because there's a certain buzz in your head. So if they were having trouble with that "ok," then you're going to say, remember that says "ok." And so this is going to say block. And so if they happen to come up with a different, like oak, then you're going to know it's "ok." And what is it? "Ok." What is it? "Ok." It's what is it? "Ok." Like in clock and block and stock. So 3 times you want to kind of do that to make sure those neural pathways have been developed. So for deeper practice, if they keep missing it, you need deeper practice. And so then you can either come up with some yourself, or if you've got a little bit of time, the best thing is to have children go on a hunt. And I always make a big deal of this about them going hunting, just like a hunter would be hunting for doves or something like that, and find words in where they see that same spelling pattern. And then they might say, oh, there's "och" in clock and sock and mock-ing and flock. And they can keep a list of these. And I would encourage you to keep that list for a while and go back to it several times, because that's what you're doing, is things that are meaningful from something you've read. And again, this isn't just a list of words. This would be from books in which mocking, if your child doesn't know what mocking is, now you've just learned a new word. When you can say, sometimes it sounds like a parrot is mocking you. And then they could realize from the rest of the story, the parrot's repeating you, and so it might sound like they're making fun of you. Mocking. Well, I thank you very much for being with us on this session, and I hope you enjoyed it. And we're going to be doing several more here at Vineyard Christian Academy, and hopefully that helps you be a more powerful interventionist when you're working with your child at home. Thank you so much. Bye.